Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really compelling idea. Learning English in a way that mirrors how children master their first language. We've gathered a load of information looking at why kids seem to pick up language so effectively. And our goal today is, well, to figure out how you, as an adult learner, can take those core principles and really accelerate your own English journey.
Yeah, and what's fascinating right away is that children achieve fluency so quickly, often without, explicit instruction.
Right.
They move from just making sounds to complex sentences in just a few years. It makes you wonder about the underlying mechanisms at play and what we as adults might be able to learn from that natural process.
Absolutely. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, learn like a child, that sounds lovely, but look, I've got a full life.
Right, busy schedules.
I can't just play all day and hope English osmosis happens. And that's a completely valid thought. We're not suggesting a return to finger painting.
No.
But the aim is to really understand the fundamental reasons behind why children are such successful language learners, and then see how we can adapt those core principles to fit our adult learning styles and, well, our busy schedules.
Exactly. It raises a key question. What are the crucial elements of childhood language acquisition that make it so effective? If we can pinpoint those, we can then consciously try to integrate them into our own strategies. It's about harnessing their natural language learning abilities, not necessarily mimicking their behavior,
Precisely. So our mission in this deep dive is to really get down to the core of how children naturally acquire language.
Okay.
We want to extract those key components and translate them into practical, actionable steps that you can start implementing right away to boost your English fluency.
Good.
We'll be exploring things like tapping into your own intrinsic drive, letting go of that fear of mistakes,
That's a big one.
creating your own immersive environment, learning through real-world context, prioritizing getting your point across over perfect grammar, the sheer power of repetition, and even bringing some, fun back into learning. Okay, let's get into this.
And if we think about the bigger picture here, it's about a potential shift in how we approach language learning.
So.
Instead of viewing it as a purely academic subject with rules and endless memorization, maybe we can start to see it as a more organic, intuitive process, much like it is for children.
Right. So why this focus on learning like a child? What's the real magic behind it?
Yeah.
It's not just about suddenly wanting to watch cartoons, though that can be a fun side effect.
Yeah.
Primarily, it's about moving toward a more intuitive way of learning, one that isn't bogged down by overanalysis. As adults, we tend to overthink everything.
We really do.
Children, on the other hand, often just jump in. Their main reason for learning language is simple: to communicate and connect with the people around them. Their motivation comes from within. They need language to express their needs, their feelings, their observations.
That intrinsic motivation is a significant factor.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Children aren't learning for a grade or some external reward. They're learning because language unlocks their world.
Yeah.
They want to tell their caregiver they're thirsty, ask for a favorite toy, or describe something new they've encountered. This inherent need acts as a powerful engine for their learning.
Exactly. And think about a young child trying to say a new word, maybe apple.
Okay.
It might come out sounding nothing like apple. But do the adults around them launch into a phonetics lesson?
No, usually not.
No. They understand the child's intention, and they might gently repeat the correct word, but the focus is on that initial attempt to communicate.
Right.
Children aren't held back by this overwhelming fear of saying things incorrectly. They experiment, they make mistakes constantly, and they learn through that process of trial and error. That lack of inhibition, that willingness to just give it a go, it's almost like a language learning superpower.
And this is often a major hurdle for adult learners. We can be so concerned about making errors, about sounding inadequate, that we sometimes avoid speaking altogether. This fear can become a substantial roadblock to progress.
Totally.
Children don't have this level of self-consciousness. Their primary focus is on conveying meaning, not on perfect grammatical structures or flawless pronunciation.
Right.
Neurologically, it's interesting, too, that the brain regions associated with the fear response, like the amygdala, they tend to be less reactive to new information in early childhood.
Oh, interesting.
Which potentially allows for more open experimentation with new sounds and words,
Then there's the aspect of immersion. For a child, their native language isn't something they study for an hour each day. It's the very fabric of their environment.
It is their environment.
They're surrounded by it constantly, from caregivers, family members, maybe even background noise like the TV or radio, plus songs and stories. It's the medium through which their entire world operates.
That constant exposure is absolutely crucial. It's not just about the sheer amount of language they hear, but also the fact that it's always directly relevant to their immediate context.
Right.
They are continuously hearing language used in real-life situations that matter to them. This constant stream of input also allows for something called statistical learning, where their brains unconsciously track patterns and regularities in the language they're exposed to, helping them internalize grammar and word order without explicit rules.
So they're like little pattern detectors.
Exactly.
And that leads us nicely to context. Children learn words and phrases because they are directly linked to tangible objects, actions, immediate situations.
Yeah.
They learn the word water when they see and want water, not from some abstract list of vocabulary. This kind of contextual learning makes the language so much more meaningful and easier to recall. It's directly tied to their lived experiences.
And this contextual embedding also allows them to grasp the subtle nuances of language in a way that, rote memorization often can't. They observe how words are used in different scenarios and with varying tones of voice, which adds layers of meaning that go beyond simple definitions.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Children absorb grammatical patterns naturally, long before they're ever taught any formal grammar rules.
They just pick it up.
They start constructing sentences that are grammatically correct simply by hearing them repeated again and again. Their focus is on understanding and being understood.
Yeah.
The explicit rules, those often come much later, if at all, and are frequently learned implicitly through continued exposure to correct usage. It's like they develop an intuitive feel for the grammar of the language.
It's as if their brains are constantly analyzing the input they receive, identifying recurring structures and patterns.
Right.
They hear so many grammatically correct examples that their brains begin to recognize these patterns and apply them, often without conscious thought or explicit instruction.
And let's not overlook the power of repetition and routine in a child's world. They thrive on it.
Oh, yeah. Bedtime stories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They want to hear the same nursery rhymes over and over. They want the same bedtime stories read to them every night, and they engage in similar daily interactions. This massive repetition really helps to solidify those language patterns in their minds, making them more automatic.
That repetition isn't just about memorization, though. It's about building familiarity and automaticity.
Right.
The more frequently they hear and use certain words and phrases, the more ingrained and natural they become. It's like building muscle memory for language.
Muscle memory for language, I like that. And finally, let's talk about playfulness. A significant amount of childhood learning happens through play.
Huge amount.
Language is woven into their games, their songs, their imaginative role-playing. It's fun, it's engaging, and there's very little pressure involved. This low-stakes environment encourages experimentation.
Play creates a safe and relaxed environment where children feel free to experiment with language without the fear of judgment or failure. This makes the learning process more enjoyable and, importantly, more memorable. Positive emotions associated with learning can significantly enhance retention.
Now, as adults, our approach to language learning is often quite different, isn't it?
Yeah, very different.
We often get bogged down in grammar rules. We try to memorize endless vocabulary lists that have no real connection to our lives.
The dreaded lists.
We're constantly translating in our heads, and that fear of making a mistake can be paralyzing.
Definitely.
We often lack that constant immersion and treat English more like an academic subject than a living, breathing tool for communication.
Right.
So the big question is, how do we bridge that gap? How do we take these incredibly powerful natural principles that guide child language acquisition and adapt them for our adult brains and our busy adult lives? That's what we're diving into next.
It's about consciously attempting to recreate some of those key conditions that make child language learning so successful, even within the constraints of our adult responsibilities and schedules.
All right, let's get practical. Principle number 1, creating your own immersion bubble.
Okay.
We've talked about how children are constantly surrounded by their native language. We can't all just pack up and move to an English-speaking country, although if you can, fantastic.
Right. That helps.
But for the rest of us, how can we recreate that feeling of being immersed? The answer is to consciously engineer our environment to maximize our exposure to English. Think of it as building your own English bubble.
And what's beneficial is that you can start small and gradually expand this bubble.
Exactly.
It doesn't need to be an all-or-nothing undertaking. Even small changes can accumulate and make a significant difference over time.
Absolutely. One of the easiest first steps is to change your digital world.
Think about it.
How much time do you spend on your phone, your computer, scrolling through social media?
A lot, probably.
Change the language settings on all of these devices to English.
Yeah.
Yes, it might feel a bit strange initially, maybe even a little frustrating,
At first few times.
but you'll be surprised at how quickly you start picking up everyday vocabulary related to technology and online interactions. You'll learn words like settings, notifications, upload, download, search, log in, log out, almost without even realizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Becomes a natural way to acquire vocabulary because it's tied to actions you perform every day.
It's a form of passive learning, but it's surprisingly effective because it's integrated seamlessly into your daily routine.
Right.
You're constantly seeing and interacting with English vocabulary in a relevant and functional context.
Then let's consider entertainment. Make English your default language for movies, TV shows, music, and podcasts like this one.
Good plug.
For movies and TV, if you're finding it challenging at first, begin with subtitles in your native language. Then, as you become more comfortable, switch to English subtitles.
Yeah, that's a good progression.
This really aids in connecting the spoken word with the written form and enhances your comprehension. The ultimate goal, naturally, is to be able to watch without any subtitles at all, relying solely on your listening skills and the visual cues,
Just like a kid does.
much like a child does. And don't hesitate to revisit content you've already seen. You'll likely be surprised by how much more you understand the second or third time around.
And when selecting what to watch, prioritize content that genuinely interests you. If you're engaged with the material, you're much more likely to remain attentive and absorb the language naturally.
Totally.
Also, don't underestimate the value of cartoons. They often employ simpler language and have clear visual narratives, making them an excellent resource for learners at various levels.
Absolutely. And music is another fantastic tool. Don't just have English music playing in the background. Actively listen to it.
Right. Engage with it.
Look up the lyrics online.
Mm-hmm.
Quick search of the song title plus lyrics will usually do the trick. Try to understand the meaning of the song. Sing along.
Yeah. Belt it out.
Singing is incredibly beneficial for improving your pronunciation and developing a feel for the rhythm and intonation of the language. Find artists whose music you genuinely enjoy and delve into their discography.
Singing also aids in memorization. You're more likely to remember words and phrases when they're associated with a melody and a particular emotional context.
And then there are podcasts and audiobooks. You're already taking a positive step by listening to this deep dive.
Hopefully.
Seek out podcasts on subjects that genuinely pique your interest. Your hobbies, current events, science, history, comedy, anything that grabs your attention. There are also numerous English learning podcasts, specifically designed for different proficiency levels.
Loads of them out there.
Audiobooks are another valuable resource, especially if you can follow along with the physical book simultaneously or read it afterwards.
Oh, yeah, that combo is great.
If you're just starting out, don't be afraid to choose simpler books or young adult fiction.
Reading along while listening can significantly enhance your listening comprehension and assist you in linking the sounds of the words with their written representations. It connects the dots.
Here's a slightly unconventional tip, but it can be surprisingly effective. Use sticky notes to label items around your home in English.
Ah, the sticky note method.
Yeah. Think basic vocabulary like door, window, refrigerator, table, chair, computer, lamp. Seeing these words daily in their real-world context really helps to reinforce that fundamental vocabulary effortlessly. It's a constant visual reminder that bypasses the need for direct translation.
It's a simple yet powerful method for directly associating the English word with the object, reducing your reliance on mental translation. Less work for the brain.
Now, this next technique requires a bit more conscious effort, but is a potent immersion strategy. Gradually begin incorporating thinking in English.
Okay, the internal monologue.
Exactly. You can start by narrating simple actions in your mind throughout the day. I am making tea. I need to check my schedule. The sun is shining. Don't be concerned about perfect grammar at this stage. The primary goal is to become accustomed to formulating basic thoughts directly in English. It's an excellent way to start breaking the habit of constantly translating from your native language.
It might feel a little unnatural initially, but with consistent practice, it becomes more automatic. It's like developing an internal monologue in English, which can significantly contribute to your overall fluency over time.
And finally, tap into the power of online communities. Join forums, Facebook groups, Discord servers, or subreddits that align with your hobbies or interests and where English is the primary language of communication.
Lots of options there.
Read the posts, try to understand the discussions, and eventually start participating by writing short comments. It's a great way to see English used in authentic, informal settings and to connect with others who share your passions.
It also offers a valuable opportunity to practice your written English and receive feedback in a supportive and engaging environment. Less pressure sometimes.
So creating this English bubble truly comes down to making a deliberate effort to surround yourself with the language in as many facets of your daily life as possible. It won't happen overnight, but even small, consistent adjustments can make a substantial difference in your overall exposure and your progress. It's about making English a continuous presence, rather than just something you study for a designated period each day.
Consistency is paramount here.
Yeah.
Even brief periods of immersion scattered throughout the day can be more effective than one long, infrequent study session, little and often.
Little and often. All right, let's move on to principle number 2, which is a significant one for many adult learners. Embrace imperfection and speak without fear.
Ah, yes, the fear factor.
We've touched on this already, but it's so critical it warrants its own focused discussion.
Yeah.
Think back to children. They are remarkably fearless when it comes to making language mistakes.
Utterly fearless.
They babble, they mispronounce words, their grammar is often inconsistent, yet they continue to speak. They learn by doing, and for them, mistakes are simply an inherent part of the learning journey.
They view language as a tool for communication, and their primary objective is to convey their meaning. They aren't preoccupied with how others might perceive their linguistic abilities.
Exactly. Now, as adults, we often have this intense self-awareness of our errors.
That inner critic.
We worry about sounding foolish, about being judged by others, or about not achieving perfection. This fear can be so powerful that it actually prevents us from speaking altogether, which ironically is the very thing we need to do to improve.
Right. It's counterproductive.
We need to try and recapture that childlike willingness to just communicate, even if it's not flawless.
It's about shifting your primary focus from absolute accuracy to overall fluency, especially in the initial stages of learning.
Yeah.
The more you speak, the more comfortable and confident you will gradually become.
So how do we cultivate this? Well, the first step is simply to start speaking from day one, even if your vocabulary is limited to a few basic phrases.
Just jump in.
Don't wait until you feel ready or until you believe you have mastered enough grammar. The truth is, you might never feel completely ready. Begin with those fundamental greetings, introductions, and simple requests. Hello. Thank you. How are you? My name is. I am learning English.
Use what you've got.
Utilize whatever knowledge you possess, regardless of how minimal it might seem. Every instance of speaking practice contributes.
And keep in mind that the initial goal is communication, not perfection. Concentrate on conveying your message, even if it involves using simpler vocabulary or making grammatical mistakes.
Right.
The majority of native speakers are incredibly patient and will appreciate your effort to communicate in their language. They're typically more interested in the content of what you're trying to say than in scrutinizing your grammatical precision.
Precisely. And you need to actively seek out opportunities to speak. This is crucial. Your spoken English won't improve if you never actually speak.
Gotta use it or lose it, basically.
There are numerous avenues to find these opportunities. One excellent method is to connect with language exchange partners. There are various websites and apps like HelloTalk, Tandem, and italki that connect you with native English speakers who are learning your native language.
Yeah, those are great resources.
You can communicate via text, have voice conversations, or even video calls. It's a relatively low-pressure way to practice your spoken English while also helping someone else learn your language.
These platforms often cultivate supportive communities where the emphasis is on mutual learning and cultural exchange, making it a less intimidating environment for practicing speaking.
Another valuable option is to work with online tutors or teachers. Services like italki, Cambly, and Preply offer affordable one-on-one lessons that can be specifically tailored for conversational practice.
Right, dedicated practice time.
A good tutor will create a safe and encouraging space for you to speak and will provide constructive corrections and feedback without making you feel self-conscious.
A tutor can also customize the conversation topics to align with your specific interests and learning objectives, making the practice sessions more engaging and relevant to your needs.
Don't forget about conversation clubs or groups. Look for English conversation groups in your local area or even online.
Yeah, meetup groups and things like that.
Practicing with other learners can sometimes feel less daunting than speaking with a native speaker, And you can all learn from each other's experiences and mistakes.
It's also a fantastic way to build your confidence and connect with other individuals who are on a similar language learning path. Shared struggle.
And here's a tip that might seem a bit unusual, but it can be surprisingly beneficial. Talk to yourself.
Okay, the shower monologue.
Seriously. Throughout your day, try narrating your actions aloud in English. Describe what you're seeing, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Practice ordering food or asking for directions, even if you're alone.
Huh.
You can even record yourself speaking on your phone and listen back. Don't listen back with a highly critical ear, but rather to identify patterns in your speech or areas where you might want to refine your pronunciation.
This form of self-talk can help you become more comfortable with the sounds of English and practice constructing sentences without the added pressure of speaking to another person. Good rehearsal.
Most importantly, you need to consciously reframe your perspective on mistakes. Stop viewing them as failures or as evidence of your inadequacy.
Change that mindset.
Instead, try to see them as proof that you are actively engaging with the language. Mistakes are an inevitable part of learning any new language, and they offer incredibly valuable learning opportunities.
Absolutely. Data points for learning.
When someone corrects you, or when you realize you've made an error, don't feel embarrassed. Feel curious. Think, oh, so that's how it's correctly said. Thank the person who corrected you, if applicable. Each mistake you identify and learn from represents a step forward on your journey to fluency.
It's a shift from a performance-oriented mindset to a learning-oriented mindset. Mistakes are not something to be avoided at all costs, but rather essential stepping stones on the path to improvement.
And finally, remember to acknowledge and celebrate your small victories.
Yes, important.
Did you successfully have a brief conversation in English? Did you understand a joke in a movie? Did you manage to order your coffee in English without any issues? Recognize these moments and give yourself credit.
Pat yourself on the back.
Positive reinforcement is so important for building confidence and maintaining motivation. Let go of that need for perfection. Embrace the messy, imperfect, but absolutely essential process of trying, making mistakes, learning from them, and trying again. That's the child's approach, and it truly works.
Building that self-assurance through small accomplishments will make you more willing to take risks and engage in speaking more frequently. It snowballs.
Okay, let's move on to principle number 3, the incredible power of repetition and mimicry.
Right. Repetition. Repetition.
We've already touched upon how children learn through a massive amount of repetition. They hear the same words, phrases, and sentence structures over and over.
Constantly.
They also possess this remarkable natural ability to mimic the sounds, the intonation, and the rhythm of the language they hear around them. As adults, we can definitely leverage these same principles to our advantage.
The key is to be deliberate about incorporating repetition and mimicry into our language learning routines. Can't just happen by accident, usually.
Let's begin with repetition in listening. Don't just watch a movie or listen to a podcast episode once and assume you've absorbed everything.
No, definitely not.
If you enjoyed it and understood parts of it, try watching or listening to it again. The second or third time around, you'll likely be surprised by how many new words and phrases you notice, how many more nuances you understand, and how much more deeply you internalize the language patterns. Think about how young children want to hear the same bedtime story night after night. There's a very effective learning principle at play there.
Re-listening and rewatching allows your brain to process the language at a deeper level. You're not solely focused on the overall meaning the second time, but also on the specific words used and how they're employed in context.
Another highly effective technique for repetition and listening is to focus on short segments of audio.
Intensive listening.
Yeah. Choose a brief section, perhaps just 30 seconds to a minute, from a podcast, a song, or a movie scene. Listen to it repeatedly. Try to transcribe exactly what you hear. Then look up any unfamiliar vocabulary.
Okay.
This intensive focus on a small piece of language can be incredibly beneficial for enhancing your listening comprehension and expanding your vocabulary.
This is also an excellent way to improve your ability to distinguish individual sounds and understand how words are linked together in spoken English, that connected speech.
Now, let's discuss repetition in speaking. This goes beyond simply memorizing lists of vocabulary.
Right, needs to be active.
One particularly powerful tool is the use of spaced repetition systems, or SRS. There are various apps available, such as Anki and Memrise, that utilize algorithms to show you vocabulary or phrases just before you are likely to forget them.
Ah, the flashcard apps.
Yep, but smart flashcards. This is a scientifically supported method for transferring information into your long-term memory. The crucial aspect here is to focus on learning phrases and complete sentences within a context rather than just isolated words.
Yes, chunks of language.
As this more closely reflects how children acquire language in meaningful chunks. Briefly, SRS works by showing you items you struggle with more frequently, while gradually increasing the intervals between reviews for items you recall easily.
SRS takes the guesswork out of scheduling your review sessions by ensuring that you are revisiting material at optimal intervals for maximizing retention. Makes it efficient.
Another vital element of repetition in speaking is simply practicing common conversational phrases until they feel completely natural and automatic. Getting those basics down cold? Think about those everyday phrases you use frequently in your native language. Identify their English equivalents. How's it going? What do you do? Could you tell me? I'd like to. And practice saying them aloud repeatedly until they roll off your tongue effortlessly without requiring conscious thought.
Achieving fluency with these fundamental phrases will make your conversations feel smoother and less hesitant. Gives you confidence.
Now, let's discuss mimicry, which is absolutely essential for improving pronunciation and developing a more natural speaking style.
Okay, sounding more natural.
One of the most effective techniques here is called shadowing. Find an audio recording of a native English speaker speaking at a comfortable pace. This could be a podcast, an audiobook, or even a YouTube video. Play the audio and attempt to speak simultaneously with the speaker, mimicking their pronunciation, their rhythm, and their intonation as accurately as you can.
Right along with them.
Don't be overly concerned about understanding every single word initially. The primary focus is on the sounds and the flow of the language. You can even start by just whispering along with the speaker and then gradually increase your volume.
Okay.
Practicing this regularly, even for just 5 to 10 minutes each day, can significantly train the muscles in your mouth and improve your ear for the subtle nuances of spoken English.
Shadowing helps you to internalize the prosody of the language, the stress patterns and intonation in a way that passive listening alone cannot achieve. The music of the language.
You've already mentioned it, but it's worth reiterating.
Yeah.
Singing along to English songs is a really enjoyable and effective method for practicing your pronunciation, your rhythm, and how words connect in natural speech.
It shifts the focus away from conscious effort and allows you to absorb the sounds and patterns of the language in a more relaxed and pleasurable manner. Plus, it's fun.
And finally, if you're watching a movie or a TV show and you hear a line that resonates with you or that sounds particularly natural, pause it and try to repeat that line, mimicking the actor's delivery as closely as possible.
Like being a parrot for a second.
Exactly. Pay attention to their emphasis on certain words, their intonation, and even their pauses. Repetition isn't about engaging in tedious drills. It's about consistent exposure and active practice that gradually makes those language patterns more automatic in your own speech. And mimicry is key to sounding more natural and also improving your listening comprehension because you become much more attuned to the subtle nuances of spoken English.
It's about developing that ear for the language and training your vocal apparatus to produce those sounds accurately and with less conscious effort.
Moving on to principle number 4. Learn in context and make it playful.
Okay, context and fun.
We've discussed how children learn language that's directly relevant to their immediate needs and often through play, which makes the learning experience significantly more meaningful and memorable. As adult learners, we can certainly adopt this approach to enhance our learning.
Learning in context helps to anchor new vocabulary and grammatical structures in your memory more effectively because they are associated with a specific situation, feeling, or experience. Gives it a hook.
Exactly. Instead of solely focusing on memorizing isolated word lists, really concentrate on learning vocabulary and phrases that are directly related to your own life, your personal interests, your job, your hobbies.
Make it relevant.
For instance, if you enjoy cooking, consciously try to learn English culinary vocabulary. If you work in the tech industry, prioritize learning tech-related terminology. If gardening is your passion, learn the English names for different plants and gardening tools.
Right.
When the language is immediately useful and relevant to you, it becomes much easier to remember because you have a tangible, real-world connection to it.
It also makes the learning process inherently more motivating because you can immediately apply what you're learning in areas that you genuinely care about. You see the payoff.
Another excellent way to learn in context is to utilize visuals and what are called realia. That is, connecting words with actual images or real objects whenever possible, much like a child does.
Realia, yeah. Real things.
Use picture dictionaries, flashcards that incorporate images rather than just translations, or simply point to objects around you and say their names in English. When you're learning verbs, try physically acting them out. This multisensory approach can significantly aid in solidifying those connections in your brain.
Engaging multiple senses in the learning process can make it more stimulating and improve long-term retention of information. More anchors.
And let's not forget the incredible power of learning through stories. Children acquire a vast amount of language through listening to and reading stories.
Absolutely. Stories are fundamental.
As adult learners, we can also benefit immensely from this. Read graded readers, which are books specifically written for language learners at different proficiency levels.
Yep, find your level.
Don't overlook children's books either. They often have fantastic illustrations and repetitive language patterns that can be really helpful for reinforcing basic vocabulary and sentence structures.
Surprisingly useful sometimes.
Short stories and even news articles on topics that genuinely interest you can also provide rich contextual learning opportunities.
Stories provide a natural flow of language and expose you to vocabulary and grammar in a meaningful and engaging narrative context, making them easier to understand and remember.
And here's where we can introduce that element of playfulness. Language learning doesn't have to feel like a constant chore.
Please, no.
There are numerous ways to inject fun and games into the process. For example, you can play language learning games on apps like Duolingo or Babbel.
Gamification.
If you enjoy video games, try playing online multiplayer games that require you to communicate with other players in English. You could also try playing traditional board games or card games with English-speaking friends or language partners.
Games create a low-pressure, interactive environment where you can practice using English in a fun and engaging way, reducing anxiety and increasing motivation. Takes the edge off.
And don't forget about the simple pleasures of watching cartoons or comedies in English. Laughter can actually enhance learning.
True. Reduces stress.
Simple cartoons and sitcoms often use repetitive language and have clear visual cues that can aid comprehension. You could also actively engage with your hobbies in English.
Integrate it fully.
If you follow YouTubers, bloggers, or social media accounts related to your interests, make a point to seek out creators who produce content in English. Read magazines or websites about your hobbies in English. If there are local clubs or groups related to your interests, see if there are anywhere English is used.
This integrates English learning into your leisure activities, making it feel less like a task and more like a natural extension of your interests and passions, much more sustainable.
You can also explore some creative activities in English, like writing simple poems or song lyrics. Keep a basic journal in English where you just jot down a few thoughts about your day. Try describing pictures or photos in English.
Little creative outputs.
When learning is contextual, relevant to your life, and genuinely enjoyable, it doesn't feel like such a struggle. You're much more likely to stick with it, and the language becomes integrated into your life in a more organic way, much like it does for a child.
Injecting playfulness taps into that intrinsic motivation we discussed earlier, making the learning process more sustainable and enjoyable in the long term. Keeps you going.
All right, let's delve into principle number 5, listen to understand, which is all about that implicit grammar acquisition we mentioned earlier.
Okay, absorbing the grammar.
Think about it. Before children start speaking in complex sentences, they spend a significant amount of time just listening.
Hours and hours.
They're actively trying to decode the sounds, grasp the meaning, and absorb the underlying patterns of the language they hear around them. They essentially pick up the grammar intuitively, just through exposure, long before they are ever taught any explicit grammatical rules.
This really underscores the importance of prioritizing listening comprehension as a foundational skill in language learning. A strong foundation in listening allows you to internalize the natural flow and structure of the language.
Absolutely. And it's not just about passively having English playing in the background, although some passive listening can certainly contribute to overall immersion.
Right. Need active focus, too.
We're talking about active listening, which involves listening with a specific purpose in mind. This could mean trying to grasp the main idea of a podcast segment or a news report.
Okay.
Or perhaps listening for specific pieces of information, like when you're watching a recipe video and listening for the list of ingredients. You might also be listening to understand someone's opinion or their line of reasoning in a conversation.
Listening with a goal.
A beneficial practice is to try and summarize what you've heard afterwards, either by speaking aloud or writing it down. Checks your understanding.
Active listening trains your brain to focus on the meaning and identify key information, rather than just hearing a stream of unfamiliar sounds. It encourages deeper processing of the auditory input.
Instead of getting bogged down and trying to analyze every single grammar rule, especially in the initial stages, try to really focus on common word combinations and sentence patterns.
The chunks again.
Notice how native speakers typically formulate questions, how they make requests, or how they express their opinions. For example, instead of dissecting the grammar of "I would like to," try to learn that entire chunk as a single useful phrase.
Gotcha.
Similarly with "would you like to?" Children learn these kinds of common chunks as single units of meaning.
These prefabricated chunks of language provide you with ready-made building blocks for constructing your own sentences and can significantly enhance your fluency in everyday communicative situations. Less thinking involved.
And this is important. Try not to overanalyze the grammar while you're actively listening or speaking, at least in the beginning.
Resist the urge.
Allow yourself to absorb those language patterns intuitively through extensive exposure, much like a child does. Trust that your brain has a remarkable capacity for recognizing these patterns over time.
Trust the process.
You can always revisit and study specific grammar points later on to refine your understanding. But don't let that constant need to analyze every single detail hinder your initial attempts at communication.
Overanalyzing can actually slow down your comprehension and make it more challenging to follow the natural flow of spoken language. It can create a mental bottleneck, paralysis by analysis.
To truly experience natural language, ensure that you are engaging with authentic materials. This includes listening to real conversations, interviews, news broadcasts, and stories that are intended for native English speakers.
Real-world English.
While materials specifically designed for language learners are undoubtedly helpful, at some point you need to immerse yourself in the language as it is actually used in real-world contexts. This will expose you to different accents, varying speeds of speech, and a broader range of vocabulary and grammatical structures.
Yeah, get used to the variety.
Think of yourself as a language detective. Listen intently, observe the recurring patterns, and really focus on understanding the overall message. The grammar will gradually start to make more sense to you implicitly through this repeated exposure, just as it does for children.
It's about developing an intuitive feel for the language, what sounds right and what doesn't, rather than relying solely on explicit knowledge of grammatical rules, that gut feeling.
Now, while we've been emphasizing the benefits of adopting these childlike learning principles, it's absolutely crucial to remember that we are, in fact, adults.
Right. Important distinction.
And as adults, we possess our own unique set of advantages when it comes to language learning, but we also encounter some common pitfalls that we need to be mindful of.
It's about striking a balance between capitalizing on the strengths of both childlike and adult learning methodologies, best of both worlds.
Exactly. On the positive side, as adults, we have well-developed cognitive abilities. We can understand abstract concepts like grammatical rules, even if we choose not to focus on them exclusively at the outset.
We can grasp theory.
We also have existing knowledge about how language functions in general, thanks to our native tongue. We understand fundamental concepts like nouns, verbs, and sentences.
We have a framework already.
Furthermore, we are capable of employing conscious learning strategies, such as utilizing dictionaries and language learning apps, setting clear and achievable goals for ourselves, and actively monitoring our progress.
We can be strategic.
And perhaps most importantly, we often have a very clear and defined motivation for learning English, whether it's for career advancement, for travel experiences, for personal enrichment, or to connect with friends and family. This strong, intrinsic motivation can be an incredibly powerful driving force.
These cognitive and metacognitive advantages can enable us to be more strategic and efficient in our language learning endeavors. Use those adult brains.
However, there are also some common pitfalls that adult learners frequently encounter, and it's important to be aware of these so that we can actively work to avoid them.
Okay, the things to watch out for.
One of the most significant is overthinking and analysis paralysis. We can become so preoccupied with trying to understand all the grammatical nuances and achieve perfect accuracy that we become hesitant to speak at all.
Yeah, getting stuck in your head.
Another common pitfall is impatience. We might have unrealistic expectations regarding the speed at which we should be progressing, forgetting that children spend years acquiring their first language.
Wanting it all now.
The fear of judgment is another major obstacle for many adults, preventing us from practicing and making mistakes in front of others.
That's social anxiety.
Then there's the tendency to directly translate from our native language, which can often result in unnatural-sounding English.
Ah, the translation trap.
Inconsistent effort is also a frequent issue. We might study intensively for a short period and then lose momentum.
The start-stop cycle.
And finally, it's easy to fall into the trap of comparing our own progress to that of others, which can be demotivating.
Recognizing these potential challenges is the crucial first step in actively working to overcome them. Awareness is key.
So the key takeaway here is to consciously strive to integrate those highly effective, childlike principles, that immersion, that fearlessness of making mistakes, that emphasis on repetition, learning in context, and playful engagement, along with that intuitive approach to listening.
Right, all the good stuff.
With our inherent adult strengths, like our developed cognitive abilities and our capacity for strategic learning. Simultaneously, we need to be actively aware of those common adult pitfalls, particularly that debilitating fear of making errors and the ingrained habit of direct translation, and consciously work to overcome them. It's about finding that optimal balance where we are leveraging the best of both approaches to accelerate our English learning journey.
It's a more comprehensive and ultimately a more effective and sustainable approach to language acquisition, finding that sweet spot.
Okay, we've covered a tremendous amount of information today.
We have.
So let's quickly recap those core principles we've discussed and talk about how you can start implementing them right away. First, cultivate your own English immersion bubble.
The bubble, yes.
By adjusting your device language settings, making English your primary choice for entertainment, labeling household items, and making an effort to think in English. Second, embrace imperfection. Start speaking from day one, prioritize getting your message across over achieving perfect grammar, and actively seek out opportunities to practice speaking.
Speak, speak, speak.
Third, harness the power of repetition and mimicry by re-listening to content multiple times, utilizing spaced repetition systems for phrases, and practicing the shadowing technique with native speakers.
Repeat and copy.
Fourth, learn in context and make it playful by focusing on vocabulary relevant to your life, using visuals and real objects, learning through engaging stories, and incorporating games and your hobbies into your learning routine.
Make it relevant and fun.
And fifth, listen to understand by actively engaging with English audio, focusing on recognizing language patterns rather than initially analyzing individual grammar rules, and utilizing authentic English language materials.
Listen actively, absorb patterns. Remember, the ultimate aim is to integrate English learning into the fabric of your daily life in an enjoyable way, rather than treating it as a separate and burdensome task.
Now here's your actionable step for the upcoming week. I encourage you to select just one or perhaps two of these strategies that particularly resonate with you,
Just one or two.
or that seem like they would be the easiest for you to incorporate into your routine immediately. Then commit to practicing them consistently for the next 7 days.
Okay, a weekly challenge.
Perhaps it's as simple as changing the language settings on your phone. Maybe it's listening to one full English podcast episode twice. It could be finding a language exchange partner online and having one short, even if grammatically imperfect, conversation. Or perhaps it's dedicating just 5 minutes each day to practicing the shadowing technique.
Small, achievable steps.
Start with small, manageable steps, gradually build momentum, and please, be patient and kind to yourself throughout this process.
Very important. Be kind.
Remember, children don't achieve fluency overnight. It's a gradual journey that requires consistent effort. The key is to adjust your mindset, to perceive learning English less like a rigid academic subject and more like a natural and engaging part of your life. Embrace that inherent curiosity, that spirit of playfulness, and that fearless desire to communicate just as a child does.
Even small, consistent actions, when repeated over time, can lead to significant progress. Focus on building sustainable habits rather than striving for immediate perfection. Consistency over intensity sometimes.
And that brings us to the conclusion of this deep dive into the natural and effective path of learning English like a child. I truly believe that by adapting these fundamental principles, we can all make our language learning journeys more effective, more enjoyable, and ultimately more successful.
Hope so.
It really boils down to tapping into that inherent joy of discovery and that essential human need for communication, much like it does for a child uttering their first words.
It's about reconnecting with those innate language learning abilities that we all possess from our earliest years. They're still in there somewhere.
So what are your thoughts on this? Have you experimented with any of these methods before? What are some of the challenges you've encountered or insights you've gained? I would genuinely love to hear about your experiences. Please do share your thoughts and any questions you might have in the comment section below.
Yeah, we'd love to hear.
We are all fellow travelers on this learning journey,
Yeah.
and it's always beneficial to learn from each other's experiences.
Your insights and personal experiences can offer valuable perspectives and encouragement to other listeners who are also navigating their English learning journey. Share the knowledge.
If you found this deep dive helpful and insightful, please do consider giving us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the deep dive so you don't miss out on future explorations of fascinating topics.
Please do.
You can also easily share this discussion with anyone else you know who is currently learning English. Your support really helps the show to grow and allows us to continue bringing you in-depth discussions like this one.
We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in and for spending this valuable time with us today. Keep listening, keep practicing, keep playing with the language, and please, never be afraid to make those inevitable mistakes.
Absolutely. Mistakes are progress.
Until our next deep dive, happy learning and have a wonderful week.